First, this is a disclaimer. I know Tracy isn't perfect. He made lots of mistakes, we all do, but we're going to pretend today like he was perfect, okay? And I was going to just talk, but I had to write it down because I just thought I'd probably lose it. So, number one, I didn't meet Tracy till I got to OSU. Our very first day at school, I met him. A lot of you here have known him much longer than I have. So, you have a lot of stories, more stories to tell than I do, but today you're going to hear mine. He was a really nice guy that I double dated with. That's how we met at the beginning. We have great stories there. I kept dating him because people kept coming up to me and telling me he was the one. So someday you can ask us about that. Tracy treated his mother and father like all of us would like to be treated. He loved them very much and he really missed them, but not anymore. His older sister, Sarah Jo, and his younger sister, Sandy, were his best buds. I always told him that he acted more like he was their husband, like they were his perfect wife. And he said, I know, they don't gripe at me all the time. Point well taken. What was it like to live with Tracy? Okay, these are only the good points. I'm skipping the bad ones. He was kind. Even though he made some huge mistakes, he was a really, really good person. He liked people. He wanted to be kind to people. That's just the way he was. We had Stacy and then Sharon, and then soon started taking in foster kids. We had kind of a crazy life. At first we talked about doing it, and then we realized we couldn't afford it, so we stopped. And then one day he answered a telephone call, talked a little bit, told me to get in the car with the kids, and on the way down there he said, we're going to pick up 2 more kids. And that kind of started a whole new life for us. We got home and now we had 4 little kids under 3. We looked like we were 16. Everywhere we went, people looked at us like, don't you know how not to do that? We got lots of really dirty looks, but it was a great way for us to start our life. We did have a life that most people would not have liked, and I think Tracy was the only one who probably could have lived that, and for that I am so thankful that God gave me him, because I don't think I would have made it with anybody else. Soon we had Scott. We brought him home, and we had 4 other kids at home when we got him there. Tracy was probably the only guy that could have handled that life, like I said. It was very hectic, chaotic, busy, and I know it was really hard on him. He had to make the money for all of us. There wasn't much privacy or attention for him a lot of the times, but he stayed. Over the years, there were times when we both wondered, was this really worth it? But he did, I did, and we stayed together. Our kids were amazing. They never complained about us sharing the time. They had to lose out on a lot of love because they had to share it with all those other kids. For over 40 years, there was always somebody else in our house, almost every single day, and Tracy really didn't complain about that. He just kind of went with the flow. We talked a lot about were we hurting our own kids, especially when they were little. We wondered if they were getting enough attention, but now that they're adults, I realize that, hey, they are fantastic adults, and maybe they're so kind and caring because they had to share with all those people over the years. Tracy was a really, really compassionate one. He was the sentimental one out of us. He saved all their teeth, their locks of hair, anything the kids wrote on a piece of paper could not be thrown away. It had to be saved. They put it on paper. It was a masterpiece. Eventually, Tracy would forget where he put something and I could toss it. If I hadn't have done that, we could have given the kids back all of their teeth when they got to be old and they wouldn't have ever had to go to a dentist. Tracy rarely lost his temper. I only saw him angry a couple of times in 54 years, I guess. And that was because one of our kids, they had to be at least 10 years old to get in trouble, but it was because one of the kids would just kind of go be a loose cannon and they'd be uncooperative. Then he might really have to talk to him. Tracy's personality, the word that keeps coming to mind is kind. He was a lot of different things, but he was compassionate, he was caring, he was just genuinely a nice person. I know that doesn't sound like much, but he was just nice. I'm sure he griped to his friends about me, but at home he was really great. The little things that mattered to this wife, I know they sound kind of crazy. I was really big on manners. He was the most mannerly person I knew. Every one of those years, he opened the doors for me. We didn't go in or out of the house without him holding the door so I could go first. Even the night before he went into the hospital, in the morning we left for the hospital, he held the door and had me go first. I like that. He liked to wash the dishes, and he even made the bed. That was something he did. And he bought this little I love you pillow, and he always put it right in the middle of our bed. He always told me thanks for whatever. Even after a horrible meal, he would tell me thanks for making his dinner, that it was really good. Then we'd start laughing and say, oh no, it was so not good. But he liked to say it was good. He liked buying cards, flowers, and candies for no reason. On a special occasion, there was always 3 or 4 cards around my house. He didn't gripe about the messy house, and as the older we got, the messier it got. He was appreciative of whatever little thing that anybody did for him, not just me, but anybody. He said, I loved you all the time. He'd call me at work every day and he'd make some crazy, usually questionable remark that would embarrass me. And then he'd tell me that he couldn't wait to see me later. But occasionally he did say, "Did you remember to look in the mirror this morning?" And that meant that I looked really bad. He was kind, he was soft-hearted, he was sweet. He was not out to impress anybody. Like I said, he rarely complained. Occasionally, if he was in pain, I could tell by his actions, but he never talked about it. He did not complain about any situation. He always said, "We're so blessed. We have it better than almost anybody in the world." He was the ultimate optimist. Everything was okay, better than okay. It was always turning out exactly as it should. Sometimes he drove me crazy. He had a warped sense of humor, especially when I wanted him to rectify a situation and he wouldn't do it. That one thing that bugged me for a long time when we were young, this is the kind of stuff he'd do. When we were young, we used to send each other cards that were a little on the racy side. And one day I sent one to work with a great big old personal sign on it. It was a little more racy than usual. And he called me that day and said, "Well, I just got to work. There's a card open on my desk and I don't know who's looked at it." Well, the bad part was I never signed my own name. I came up with different names, Mary, Jane, whatever, when I sent him those off-color cards. And so I said, "You go out there and tell that whole office that card was from me." And he said, "No, I'm not going to do it. I might get a whole lot more attention if I let him think it was somebody else." And he never told him. I don't think he ever told him. I did lots of goofy, humiliating things. And usually he laughed and then he just went along with them. Many husbands would have been embarrassed to claim me, but he just rolled his eyes and he kept on going. Not sure what our kids did, but Tracy liked it. When we were young and stupid, years ago when it was safer, Tracy would bring people home that he had just picked up. They'd stay a few hours or more, maybe a few days if they needed to. I can't believe we ever did that, but we did. He could always find a way to help people financially, even when we didn't have anything. Sometimes a lot, sometimes very little, but that's all we had. That was one of my favorite things about him. He tried to find a way to help other people. A few times a week, he'd stop for some guy in a corner and he'd tell them, "Hey, I'm not going to give you cash, but I'll take you out for a meal." That person only wanted the meal. They had no idea they were going to get an hour little mini series from this little mini preacher that they'd gone to eat with. Tracy was not shy about telling them that Jesus would save them if they only turned their life over to him. He'd tell anybody that would listen. He'd give rides to people all the time, but he did get more careful as he aged because he knew he couldn't fight them off if he had to. He always told them about Jesus, and over the years we've had people call us and say, "You know, I found you in the phone book. Thank you. I'll never forget what you did for me." We got a couple of letters. I loved the letters from people that he had just picked up off the street. Tracy was the guy who left tracts everywhere. He really liked one particular one. He had a lot in his pocket. Whenever anybody waited on us and he would give him a card that said thank you, or if he'd leave him a tip, he'd give him a little thank you tract. Tracy loved to work. His flaw was that he trusted everybody. Your handshake was supposed to be your word. Even though some people tried to make him look like a crook, they sent out all kinds of things saying that he may have, people have said, all of which turned out to be perfectly legal. You can do that. But he was never bitter. I wanted him to defend himself and tell people what really was going on. But if he said, if somebody doesn't know me well enough to know that I wouldn't do that, then I'm not going to bother to tell him. And he didn't. It was very difficult for me to understand that, but it really never crossed his mind that a businessman would not tell you the truth. It was very hard for him to believe that any kind of business person would intentionally lie to get what they wanted, and I think he really got hurt by that. He said he could not look at the world that way. He had to think of people in their dealings as being honest and not intentionally misleading. He just couldn't work that way at all. It always bothered me that he didn't learn more lessons, but that was the way he was. Over the years, we've talked about Tracy losing his job, but he never complained to me about what happened. He said he was not meant to be the one to have that job. We were supposed to be exactly where we were now, and the new people in charge would do a much better job of helping others than he could do. I might be angry, but he really wasn't. And that was that. It was over. We lost everything that we had, but he always said that we'd not lost anything that mattered. He said God would take care of us, but I wasn't sure that would have happened if God hadn't have given us the kids that he gave us. They stepped up to help. Tracy cared a lot about people. He was not a great boss because he didn't want to fire anybody. He always said that someone would do well eventually. You just had to find the right position for them where they could excel. I would try and get him to fire a lot of people, but he never did it. He really liked those people. Rarely did he say anything negative about another person. He found always their positive qualities. He wanted everyone to succeed, and he would try to find them the place where they could do that. Tracy liked politics. He enjoyed discussing the state of the world, and it didn't bother him if the person sitting next to him that he was talking to thought exactly opposite of the way he did. Tracy loved the Lord, and he wanted everybody to know him too. He studied the Bible for an hour and a half to 2 hours early every morning. He had a notebook every month, and he wrote things down. I didn't look at him till he died. It's kind of like his diary. Now I have looked at a couple of months. He had letters all over everything that were codes for some sayings. And he always made these long lists. In fact, one of them is on the front of the bulletin that you got today. That was just his last list that he made. That's part of his last list. He wrote these codes, and he would put these dates, and he would do pages and pages of these same letters and these same dates, which I don't know what they mean. But I did recognize one, ATTT, which means always tell the truth, because that was one that he told all the kids. He was always, with that, whatever little kids he was around, that would be the first thing he'd teach them was ATTT. Tracy wrote them every day. Like I said, I really don't know what they mean. Maybe someday I will. Every day he had prayers for our family, always for me and for our kids and for our grandkids. Then each day he listed lots of people asking for salvation for them or that some particular need would be met. A lot of the names I recognize, but there's many in there I don't. People were always asking him to pray for somebody, so they would go into his book, he'd pray for them, they might be there for a couple days, they might be there for weeks. When he was in the long-term care hospital 2 years ago, when he got stronger, the workers kept coming in when I was there and they'd say, "Hey Tracy, can you talk to me at 2 o'clock? Hey Tracy, can I come back at 6? And they would come in and have these little talk fests with Tracy. I don't know what they were talking about, but I loved it, that they wanted to come in and talk because I knew that they'd be taking really good care of him. He was always reading a book, and it was almost always about God. Tracy loved his kids and his grandkids more than anything in the world. Nothing made him happier than hearing about them. He rejoiced with the good news and hurt for them if something bad was happening. He prayed that they would all follow the Lord. He wanted nothing more for them than what the Lord had planned for their lives. He knew each would have the best life ever if they just let God lead. Tracy's dying Tuesday was a prize. We thought he'd have a couple more years with us at least, but he was ready. It was written all over his notebooks that he was not afraid and he was looking forward to being in heaven. I mean, he wrote that and over and over and over, and he's celebrating now. In the hospital, I felt like everything we did to help him, Tracy was neutralizing with some new setback. In my head, I kept hearing him say, "I'm not going to let you win this one. Leave me alone and let me go to heaven." And I'd do something new, and then he'd do something else. Finally, Tracy won. It was awful for our family, but there were so many tears. But in the ICU waiting rooms, you would have thought that we were having a party. Everyone in the family wanted to be there. I kept asking them to take a day off, but they didn't do it. There was so much laughter that it was really inappropriate. You would have thought that this was the best times of our lives. Sharon and Stacy made friends with all the other people in the ICU. We know all their stories, and we'll be praying for all those families. The nurses at Mercy were saints. We called them our angels. They took such good care of Tracy. I knew our kids and our grandkids were compassionate, but I was amazed at how they responded to their papa. For a week and a half, everybody rubbed on him, patted him, told him stories, even though that he was in a coma and they knew he couldn't respond. One of them doing that was more than I could have asked for, but all of them that way. I'd not really thought of our family as being caregivers, but it was amazing to watch them. Papa was the first person that they'd been with when they died, and that is such a horrible position to be in. I told all of them they could leave, that anyone who wanted to stay could, that Papa would not ask them to do that for him. Everybody stayed for hours. They talked to him, they kissed him, they told him how much they loved him. This is how we ended our days for many years. Tracy watched sports in the living room, and I watched Hallmark. I know you can't make any more jokes about the Hallmark Channel than what Tracy made. Eventually, he would come to my side of the bed and he'd bring me dessert. No matter how full he was from dinner, he always had dessert. Matter of fact, we're going to have a lot of desserts out in the lobby, and we hope you're going to join us because that would be his favorite thing. It usually involved ice cream, a whole lot of Cool Whip, and cookies or cake. We laid in bed, we'd watch tape news, then he would say he was ready to go to sleep, and I never was. Then Tracy would kiss me goodnight, he'd held my hand, and then he'd say, "If I should die tonight and I go to heaven, don't be sad. I'll be so happy, but I want these to be the last words you hear from me. I love you." And then he would roll over and he'd go to sleep. That was a pretty fantastic way to end the day, and I know he's really, really happy to be in heaven. Tracy would want to be sure that I thanked all of you. He would be so appreciative of this. In fact, I know he's looking down from heaven and he is saying thank you. Some of you people have been friends of his since you were in grade school, much longer than I've known him, and he always thought he had the best friends in the whole world. So thank you. But mostly to our family. He loved his kids and grandkids so much, and I'm sure that they know it, but I want to say this publicly. He thought you were the best. He's looking down on you. He may drive you crazy because he will be telling you what he thinks you should do and what you probably don't do, so be careful. He's going to get you. But he did love he loved his kids and grandkids so much, and everybody thinks they've got the best, but we really truly have the best. And we want to thank all of you very much, and to our kids, your dad's going to miss you, but you know where he is. Thanks.